everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video I'll be sharing with you all the books that I ended up reading in the month of June, in addition to the books that I plan on reading in July. So I feel like I've been in a bit of a reading slump recently. I think it's just because part of it too is I did a lot of traveling, and then I just don't tend to read a lot if I'm just sitting in a hotel room by myself, especially because I borrowed my fiance's Switch and I was just playing Breath of the Wild the entire time. So I didn't do a lot of reading while I was traveling earlier this month, and then I just felt very slumpy just in life in general. I feel like this is a big transitional phase for me, especially kind of looking for jobs, but kind of completing my PhD. Like, you work towards this like main goal and then like it's done, and like once you complete it, it's done, and then it just kind of feels like a weird transitional phase. So I think I've just felt a little bit slumpy, but I definitely feel like the reading and like love of reading has kind of come back again. So that is also very good as well. So like I said, I feel much better. There will be some traveling towards the end of July, but overall I will be mostly at home for the majority of the month, which will be nice. So I'll quickly cover the two books that I read this month. I did really enjoy the two books. One of them was actually like fairly long, so I'm giving myself some leeway with that, but I'm happy. I read two books, you know, I enjoyed both of them, and that's really good. And then I'll discuss the books that I plan on reading in July, which are kind of all over in terms of genre, which is always exciting, and there'll be some carryover from my previous TBR that I didn't end up reading this month. So without further ado, let's get started. First up, I have Lessons in Chemistry by Garmus, and this book was fantastic. I read the majority of this when I was flying to Vail for a conference, and I loved it. I read this kind of disjointedly because I had the ebook from the library when we were traveling in Quebec, but my library loan expired, so I had to wait until I was to finish the other book that I was reading so I could kind of pick up where I left off. And this book is fantastic. We follow Elizabeth Zott, who is a scientist. She's very smart, she's very bright. She works as a kind of researcher for this company during the 1950s, where it's kind of frowned upon for women to even like be a part of STEM or do anything outside the household. So she's kind of very much struggling being in a male dominated field, but she ends up falling in love with this guy, and it kind of goes off from there. We kind of have the like past storyline and the present day storyline where she is taking care of her daughter, and she ends up becoming a host for a kind of cooking, like primetime cooking show, and it kind of really takes off. This book is fantastic. I've seen it kind of everywhere. When this book came out, it was like on the top of every list. Like, it was Barnes & Noble's book of the year last year, and I think it is really well deserved. I think this book has so many things to offer, and it was just a joy and a delight to read. It deals with darker subject matter as well in terms of grief, and I like how it kind of integrates a lot of the sexism that was involved with kind of the 50s and women in STEM in general, which as a PhD in biomedical engineering I could really appreciate. I could still kind of like how Elizabeth kind of feels is how sometimes I feel with being in a male dominated field. But I really loved it. I think it is a very special book. There's a lot of humor kind of integrated into this as well, and I'm really excited for the TV show. I was telling my fiance, I'm like, when this comes out, we are going to be watching it. I'm going to make you watch it because this book was so good, and I do think Brie Larson will be an amazing Elizabeth, which I'm very excited about. And yeah, I think this will translate really well onto like a TV show premise, which I'm really excited about. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I really loved it. Like I said, like I like marathoned the last of this book while I was on the planes getting to and from Vail, and yeah, it's definitely worth all the hype. I like how they integrate a lot of like science into here as well, and it was just a joy to read. And yeah, it's definitely worth all the hype and the attention that it's been getting. It did not let me down, and I just cannot wait for the TV show now. And finally, kind of the last book that I read this month was The Golden Doves by Martha Hall Kelly. I finally picked this one up after it being on my TBR for a few months, and I really love this. I'm a huge fan of her like Faraday trilogy, like the Lilac Girls trilogy, and so this one I was really excited about, and there is some like crossover with some of the characters from Lilac Girls, which was a lot of fun. But this follows two friends who during World War II were part of the French resistance, and they worked as a team known as the Golden Doves, and they ended up getting caught and sent to Ravensbrück. And so we kind of get a dual kind of storyline of them kind of working in the resistance during 1945, and then we also follow them kind of their present day storyline in 1952, where Arlette, who is looking for her son who disappeared at the camps at Ravensbrück, and then we also follow Josie, who's working for U.S. Army intelligence, who's tracking down one of the doctors that experimented on women at Ravensbrück, and she's extra motivated because her mom perished at that camp as well. And this one I think is a little bit misleading, especially being this author, because at least her previous trilogy, and I feel like what she's known for is historical fiction, really putting you in the heart of kind of these major world events like World War I, World War II, the Civil War. This one's a little bit different. I would say like a third of it is very much kind of centered on their resistance work and time at the camp. And then the majority of the book is focusing on their present day storyline. So in this case, it's kind of like, it was more like a kind of mystery thriller, I would say. Like, it was a weird combination of historical fiction, kind of mystery and intrigue, and then kind of a thriller aspect, which kind of took me by surprise, but I think it was like really enjoyable because it was just something completely different from what I was, anticipating and expecting. So I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, especially like the last 150 pages. I was like gripped, and I didn't guess like the big plot reveal at the end, which was really exciting. I did think there were some pacing issues, especially in the beginning, in regards to kind of jumping around within the storylines, and like I felt like that was a little bit kind of more disjointed, but I think the author definitely gets her footing kind of in the second half of the novel, which I thought was really well done. It was just really interesting and a very kind of twist to the kind of very formulaic historical fiction that we're kind of used to. But yeah, this one was just a lot of fun. I think it could have been like slightly shorter, maybe like 100 pages shorter, but that's just me being nitpicky. But I think if you are a fan of her original trilogy, I think you would really enjoy this. Like I said, it was a lot of fun, something totally different and unique, and yeah, definitely like worth the read. Like I said, it took me by surprise in a good way. Next, moving on to my TBR. Like I said, they're kind of all over in terms of like genre, which I think will make it a lot of fun. These first two have been on my TBR for the past 2 months, so I won't really talk too much about these in detail, just briefly mention them, because like I said, they've been on my TBR for a while, and I think you guys are probably tired of me getting a synopsis. But first up, I have Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. I think this is a YA kind of high school romance of like, friends to enemies to lovers type thing, where they get thrown into this kind of high school survival event, like camping event, and they are 2-part survival course, and they kind of get partnered together, and it kind of goes off from there. And then also I have The Lost Girls of Willowbrook by Ellen Marie Wiseman, which kind of deals with the mental institutes in America during, I want to say, like the 50s. And it kind of goes off from there. But yeah, these were ones I've already mentioned several times in my TBRs, but I definitely will be getting to these two this month. But I think this would be a short, like, fun read to enjoy. And I read this novella when it came out several years ago, but I guess this author and this series in general is gaining a lot of traction on BookTok, which is interesting because I remember these books were popular like 10 plus years ago, but I guess now they're getting their second wave on TikTok. And it is the illustrated edition of Morrighan by Mary E. Pearson, which is basically like a novella that explains kind of the origin of the Remnant Chronicles world, or like the Dance of Thieves kind of world that we kind of get introduced to. And like I said, I read this, like I love that trilogy. I like marathoned them when they all came out. Like it's just a really well crafted, probably one of my favorite YA fantasy series of all time. And like I said, this one I've read, but I don't really remember too much about it. But there is like this kind of beautiful illustrations kind of interwoven throughout, and yeah, like I don't really remember a lot about this, but there's like kind of illustrations and they kind of revamped it. So I think just because of the popularity, and when I was kind of reading it, the author's note, she kind of said like she didn't really expect like kind of this revamp of this popularity in this series, especially having the kind of original trilogy being finished like several years ago. So it'll be fun to revisit this. I definitely, like, every now and then I'm like, I just want to reread that trilogy, because I think I've reread it like 3 or 4 times now, and I just love it as much, so like just as much as I did the first time. So I thought this one will just be a fun, like, quick, you know, read to kind of throw in here, especially because the next 2 books I'm going to talk about are fairly chunky. And lastly, this is a duology that I will be buddy reading with one of my friends for my master's, and it is the King of Scars duology by Leigh Bardugo. I read these, like, King of Scars when it came out, and I think it was like far enough along from when I read the original Grisha trilogy, and then I never finished the Six of Crows duology, so I was very much confused and trying to remember like these major plot points and things that happened. So I have no recollection of what happened in this, so I'll be like reading it for the first time. I know like roughly the general premise, but kind of from there I really don't know too much. I'll be like reading it for the first time. So this one kind of follows Nikolai after the events, I want to say, of Crooked Kingdom, and it's a duology mostly pertaining to him. We also kind of get Zoya in here and Nina as well. So I think it kind of deals with kind of the post-war, you know, Grisha, or I guess like Ravka climate, and kind of the struggles that he has as a young king trying to kind of rebuild the kingdom after the events of the original trilogy. So I'm excited. Nikolai was my favorite character, is my favorite character. I think Nikolai and Nina are my favorite characters of the kind of Grishaverse. So I'm very happy we have a book duology dedicated to Nikolai, and then we kind of get more Nina as well. I've heard polarizing things of King of Scars. Like I said, it was so long ago that I didn't remember a lot of the plot points, so I don't remember how I felt about this one. But people were kind of polarized with this one, but people seem to really like the concluding novel in this, Rule of Wolves. So I think, you know, I will enjoy it. Like I said, I've kind of been like hit or miss with some of the Grisha ones. Like some people love, I'm like, you know, it was okay. So we'll see kind of where I fall within the spectrum. Like I said, luckily this will be like reading this for the first time, and I bought this at Half Price Books when it was like a new release, and it ended up like, I was very surprised because it ends up being like one that is actually signed. So I don't know if they didn't realize it was a signed copy, or I just got very lucky because, like I said, there's no sticker advertising it. So a nice little fun little secret tidbit when I first opened this one. But yeah, I'm just gonna kind of just marathon these next, like this series, just kind of get it done. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what are some of the books that you read this month and which ones you plan to read moving into July. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.